College football week 0 is in the books. Doctor, please give me more of that. That was fantastic. Ireland, where it all got started. Wow, was that fun. Dan DeSetto here, 1/4 Irish, by the way, so I'm allowed to wear this shirt. And I am the host of the DPS All Football Talk RodCast, featuring AI Engine Rodney doing his picks every week of the season. And we are here for the Week 1 RodCast 2024 season, Week 1. And we're so excited that it's underway. I tell you what, college football never disappoints. You think it's kind of a weak slate going into Week 0. It's going to be kind of a boring day. Saturday, not much going on. Florida State's going to crush Georgia Tech. Nevada is going to get crushed by SMU, etc. And, hell, I watched Tarleton State. What a game that was. Tarleton State against McNeese. That was an outstanding game with a big comeback from McNeese that fell short. What a great Week 0 it was. Topped off by another underdog. All 4 underdogs in the FBS games versus FCS, or FBS versus FBS, wound up covering. All 4 underdogs did. But, however, this guy right here decided to do a bet, his first play of the season. Didn't use Rodney to do it, just my own gut feeling that the New Mexico Lobos would be tired of everybody being down on them. Big underdogs at home against FCS Montana State. The number just kept growing and growing and growing, and I think it was like 16.5 at kickoff, something like that. And it just kept growing and growing. Everybody putting their money on Montana State to blow out the New Mexico Lobos from the FBS. So this guy said, I'm going to take that bet at plus 350. So what happened in that game? I know you want to talk about Florida State versus Georgia Tech, but I want to first talk about plus 350. My bet, my first one of the season. And we led the entire game until 10 seconds left in the game. Montana State scores, and my plus 350 dreams gone. That's how my season started. Yeah, I didn't make a play on Georgia Tech and Florida State. If I would have, I would have lost that too. But, man, what a way to lose our first bet of the season after leading the entire game and then lose it with 10 seconds remaining in the game. 17-point deficit Montana State came back from with 21-point fourth quarter unanswered against New Mexico in New Mexico. My feeling was New Mexico was at home. They were listening all summer to everybody telling them how Montana State's going to come in and whoop them, this little FCS team. They're going to be the first team to lose to an FCS team in the 2024 season. I thought they would rise up, and then it almost came to fruition. Bronco Mendenhall, who I have a lot of respect for as a coach, and, yeah, it just didn't happen. So, 0-1 to start the season. Oh, man. That was fun. But how about that Florida State-Georgia Tech game? Wow, was that fun or what? Unless you're an FSU fan, but even FSU fans probably, deep down in their hearts enjoyed the good football game that it was. It was a good football game. And the reason it was a good football game, Georgia Tech's offensive line, and more importantly, their defensive front seven, stepped up like no one expected them to do. You see some video of Georgia Tech's offensive linemen standing over the pile on the goal line and stuff like that. These are massive individuals, these guys. This Georgia Tech offensive line, these are real men. They have 3 guys returning, and they got some big horses up front, and I tell you what, that was some good football to watch. Just effort plays after effort plays, both sides fighting hard. And to be honest, me watching the game, they looked like a way better team. Georgia Tech did. Will they wind up being a way better team? That remains to be seen. That's the beauty of it. Florida State, if it were a 4-team playoff, Florida State would already be eliminated, right? Their season would be over, as well as everybody else in the ACC. Season would be over. But not this year. Not this year. You actually have a chance to come back and make the playoff like the God intended. So here we go. The 2024 season is underway. 12-team playoff. You can redeem yourself and get back into the playoff discussion, even if you're not one of the chosen ones. So great game, and I'll tell you what, the Haynes backfield really played well in that game, and definitely a shocker. We all looked at Georgia playing Georgia Tech last year, and most people said, well, Georgia Tech played them a pretty doggone good game, but Georgia was looking ahead to the SEC championship game. Maybe that wasn't the case. Maybe they actually are turning a corner. Offensive lineman for a coach, bringing toughness to that team. That middle linebacker with that neck roll that I used to play with when I was a player back in the day. You love that stuff as an ex-linebacker. So, fun times in Ireland to kick off the season. FSU takes the L. Georgia Tech gets the win. Georgia Tech takes the early lead in the ACC standings, and Florida State is going to climb from number 17. Unprecedented, the first time we've had a 17th place player in the FBS. So 17th place in their conference. So here we go. It's going to be fun. Man, I can't wait. Week 1 is only a couple days away. And we have got some fun action coming up this week, too. We have 3 AP Top 25 versus Top 25 matchups to look forward to. In Week 1 coming up, here they are. So we've got Clemson versus Georgia, 14-point favorite. Georgia Bulldogs, at least the time that I captured these spreads. You all know the story with how this works if you've been following for a couple of years now. You know how I do it. Every Tuesday morning, 5 a.m. or close to 5 a.m. as I can get, I capture the spreads, and that's the data I use for Rodney's ATS picks for the week. Always a Tuesday morning spread, with the exception of Week 1. I captured these spreads 2 weeks ago, and that's the data I will use for Week 1. Georgia, 14-point favorite over Clemson. Rodney thinks Clemson will cover that 14 points. I'm not so certain. Personally, I'm not so certain. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, the game was excellent. It was a close game 2 years ago. I don't believe Georgia scored an offensive touchdown in that game. So, but this is a different Georgia team, and, Carson Beck, returning favorite for the Heisman. They are a pretty dominant offensive line, considered one of the best in the country, and Clemson with not many players back on defense this year from a pretty decent defense that they had last year, particularly against the pass. So a lot of guys in the NFL now from the secondary of Clemson, and that's where the concern is if you're a Clemson fan like myself. We saw a little bit of it when we played Kentucky in the bowl game. The new guys step in, Kentucky wide receivers running wide open in the secondary. Clemson is near and dear to my heart because that's my alma mater, and I'm a little concerned about my team going into this year. We will see what happens. But and I think mostly there's a lot of bad press. Some of it's self-inflicted bad press because of the lack of use of the portal. But there's also just a lot of bad press. Everybody wants to bring Clemson down from where they were because of their dislike for Dabo Swinney. And, that makes us, kind of dig in a little harder. So I even heard one guy say they need to fire Dabo Swinney. And I think it's way too early for that. Dabo that's building, because it's been 3 years now of inability to fix the offensive side of the ball. And year 2 under Garrett Riley is a huge one for Clemson. So we'll see. We got some good offensive linemen coming back. I'm definitely I like our receiver room better than I have in the past couple of years. I'm hopeful that we can kind of turn things around a little bit. We'll see. Rodney says we cover the spread. How good is this game? Notre Dame and Texas A&M. How intriguing is that one going to be in Kyle Field? Wow. Notre Dame started out as a small favorite. It moved to Texas A&M side. Mike Elko, first game as head coach of Texas A&M. He returns after defensive coordinator stint, and he's got a loaded roster of talent. And Mike Elko, 2 situations this year. Mike Elko taking over a loaded roster, and Kalen DeBoer in Alabama taking over a loaded roster. The 2 really good, highly respected coaches who also take over talented rosters. Both of those 2 teams are really going to be interesting to watch in 2024. Rodney says Texas A&M covers this 2.5-point spread at home against Notre Dame in week 1. It's going to be very intriguing. Notre Dame, you can say what you want about Notre Dame. Last year, who was Ohio State's, signature win? It was going into Notre Dame and getting that hard-fought win that they maybe shouldn't have gotten against Notre Dame on the road. Everybody who beats Notre Dame, they want to use that game as their bellwether game, and yet everybody wants to drag down Notre Dame. I personally think that's a good roster on the Notre Dame squad, and that's going to be a good game. Texas A&M, Notre Dame, very intriguing week 1 matchup there. Speaking of intrigue, holy mackerel, LSU and USC. I don't know how long ago they actually put this game together on the schedule, but you're talking about 2 teams that are absolutely identical in terms of the way they were built last year, right? Outstanding offenses, Heisman Trophy quarterbacks, right? High flying. In fact, LSU was the best offense statistically in the DPS era, which is back to 2011 is when I started keeping stats. 2011. So since 2011, there has not been a better offense than last year's LSU team. Now, how much with a new quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier, will LSU fall? They lose those 2 high draft pick NFL receivers. So Neighbors and Thomas are gone, and how much will their offense drop off, and will it give them time to get that defense? Both teams' defense is ranked 90th or worse last year. This game is going to be really exciting. This one, you would think it was going to cash the over like in the first 15 minutes, right, of the game. But who knows? Maybe it's actually going to do the opposite. It's going to be weird, But look who Rodney has picked on this game, USC, to come in and cover that 3.5-point spread against LSU. So LSU needs to hope that is Rodney's pick for the SEC champion this year, LSU Tigers. Rodney's got to hope that LSU wins the game by 3. So, because, he needs his SEC champions to be a strong team. So there's Rodney's picks for week 1, AP top 25 versus top 25 matchups. That is one thing I wanted to show you this week. Another thing that I wanted to show you for this week is the preseason leans for the top 10, the AP top 10. This data was collected a few days ago. It was a week ago, actually, August 19th. So it might have changed a little bit, but I find this data interesting. So there's your AP top 10. FSU will drop out of the top 10. But as you can see, the public is leaning on the over 10.5 for Georgia, right? Interestingly enough. And that is a 125 and a slight underdog to the under. So a little bit towards the over as far as Georgia is concerned. A bigger underdog for the under, if I should say, or let's say the public is leaning even a little bit heavier on the over, is Ohio State, the number 2 team in the country. A lot of people have either Georgia or Ohio State picked as their national champion prediction this year. Rodney, as you recall, has Ohio State picked as the Big Ten champions this year, and he's got them going over the 10.5. The public also agrees with that, and they're even bigger favorite to go over than Georgia is. So 10.5 on that. Georgia's schedule is a lot tougher, I think, than Ohio State's. But Ohio State has to go to Oregon, the number 3 team. People are leaning slightly, as you can see, very slightly towards the under on Oregon. Negative money on both sides means the public isn't really leaning heavily one way or the other. One of the interesting ones, a pretty heavy favorite to go under the 10.5 is number 4 Texas. Plus 145 if you're a Texas believer and think they're going to go over 10.5 wins in their first year in the SEC. You can get almost 1.5 times your money back if you believe that. So Texas at minus 179 for the under 10.5. The public is leaning on Alabama with their very difficult schedule and a first-year head coach to go under 9.5. As you can see, a plus 120 if you believe in Alabama getting 10 or 11 or 12 wins in 2024. Everybody's believing heavily on, not heavily, but believing in Ole Miss. As you can see, not heavily because it's minus on both sides. But the over is a slight favorite for Ole Miss. And then there's Notre Dame, the team we talked about, which we predicted to lose. All right, Notre Dame, under 10.5 is pretty heavily favored, minus 175 there. And then you got Penn State. Michigan over 8.5. So, which is surprising to me that the over is the favorite for Michigan. I guess that number actually dropped. I think it started at 9.5. It's now over 8.5 as a favorite. So a lot of people thinking 9-3 for Michigan. And then Florida State was even money on both sides for the under 9.5. Under/over 9.5, even money on both sides. And they've already taken their first loss. So this data was captured before the 24th, which is when FSU took their loss. And so that's what we've got there. Those are your top 10 teams' public leans for regular season win totals. That's one thing I wanted to show you. And then we move on to Rodney's predictions for 2024's week 1. So we already, before we get in the updated week 1 positions for Rodney, let's talk about, I made several plays for the preseason. This is something I did not do last year. I only did one play last year for the preseason, and that was Michigan to win the national title at plus 980. It was 980 or 990, I can't remember. But Michigan to win the national title last year was my only preseason play. This year, I played a few teams to make the playoffs. Penn State, even LSU as an underdog to make the playoffs. Alabama to make the playoffs. Notre Dame to make the playoffs. Ohio State, Georgia, even though they're big favorites, I bet them to make the playoffs. So I've got several make the playoffs plays for this year. But I also have some win totals that I went ahead. So I told you Rodney did this season sim. Not going to be correct because he doesn't do any portal studies, anything like that. No returning production, none of that. So it should have absolutely no, it should be very low likelihood that it's going to succeed. But I went ahead and took some of his bigger, the win totals with the most margin. And here's what I got. So Virginia, the under 4.5 on Virginia, that's a minus 101. Five of these are favorites plays that I took, and then I took a couple underdogs. I'm not crazy about any of these bets, but here they are. Arizona State under the 4.5. I think they're going to have a tough year again. Same with Baylor. These are teams that Mike Aranda in Baylor having a tough time getting that thing going in the new era. Oklahoma, Rodney is actually higher on Oklahoma than he is on Texas joining the SEC, even though Oklahoma was given a far tougher schedule. So he's got Oklahoma going over the 7.5 at minus 119. And Texas, a big favorite to go under the 10.5. Rodney's on that position as well. And then Colorado, who knows what we get with Colorado? I'm not sure. This is a team that changes so much. Rodney is not convinced. And remember, Rodney's preseason sim used trajectories and things like that and variabilities of the program based on schedule and based on how they performed in back-to-back weeks on different road conditions and home conditions and things like that. So that's what these plays came from. These are the ones I made for the preseason. I didn't put a lot of money on these because you have to actually lock your money up for the entire season until they pay out one way or the other. They take your money or they pay out. So difficult call for Kansas. Mike Leopold, they're doing a really good job at Kansas last year. I think everybody's going to adjust. I'm not crazy about it. Over 9.5 for Kansas. They do have a favorable schedule, but I have seen a couple of experts predict Kansas to win the Big 12. We'll see. I don't really like that bet at all, especially because at an over 9.5, you have to wait to the end of the year to figure it out, right? So, if they're going to get there or not. So those will be fun. I didn't put a lot of money, like I said. This is like pizza money on this stuff because I don't have faith in Rodney's method for doing this because I haven't had years of study with it. So not a lot of money on these, but they're just for fun bets, regular season win totals. This will be the last time we have to talk about that because we'll have games to discuss coming up. That's one thing we did. And the last thing I'll do is the national champion pick. Second, and then before I do that, here are the updated plays from week 0, week 1. Remember, we didn't have any week 0 plays except the plus 350, which wasn't a Rodney play, so it's not going to be counted in the overall money totals here at the top. So here we go, and I put in the juice numbers there that I like to do minus 110s. There weren't any 110s in the preseason. There should be 110s starting next week when I do my normal Tuesday capture. We'll see. But here it is. I've got Minnesota covering against North Carolina. UMass was a lower favorite. People have been putting money on UMass, so that number's been rising. Two of them that are interesting, Florida versus Miami. I've got the Florida as a slight favorite or slight underdog against Miami in the swamp. I think Florida gets that game. That's a minus 118. Fresno State against Michigan, right? Plus 21.5. Can Fresno State keep it within 21.5 against a new Michigan regime? I don't know. It's a new Fresno State regime as well. So I don't know what the heck is going to happen there. If I study this in the new era, if I study for a couple more years and start to look at new coaches and new regimes, maybe we'll have some smarter bets. We'll see. South Carolina has had trouble covering against the FBS Group of 5 opponents, but we've got them covering in week 1 against Old Dominion. And then the other two interesting ones are Georgia Tech and Florida State. Off of the game last week, their numbers have probably changed quite a bit since I captured these, which was a few days ago. So those numbers have probably changed after the FSU game. So take a look at those before if you plan to tail any of these bets, make sure you look at how those numbers have moved based on the game. So that's the update of the plays. That includes the juice that I wound up paying. The largest juice was, of course, Texas A&M covering against Notre Dame, and Georgia Tech against a brand new regime in Georgia State. So, all right, so that's it. That's the week 1 plays updated. The other one, so we always have. If you followed me last year, every week I try to do a $10, just $10, 3 underdog money line parlay. That's a lot of stuff to unpack. First of all, it's money line bet. That means who's going to win the game outright. Okay? Then it's always betting on the underdog side. So picking 3 underdogs is difficult to do in an FBS game, right? 3 underdogs. And I parlay those 3, and I put $10 on it. It's not a lot of money. It's not a very high probability that they'll win. But if you do win, you can make some decent money off of it. 2 years ago, we won one of them for the season. We do one a week. We won one, and it was enough to cover all of that season plus a little bit of last season. And last season, I wound up losing all of them. Most of the time, you'll get 2 right, and then the third one won't come in. So that's kind of the way it happens. Sometimes you get 2 wrong and 1 right, but most of the time you get at least 1 right. And it just makes it interesting. It's not a lot of money to lose, but it's fun. It's fun if you hit them, and you can brag about it. So my 3 team money line parlay is as follows, and I try to pick teams that are, kind of bigger underdogs that Rodney has closer. The games have closer. So I've already chalked it up as a loss as a minus $10, even though I shouldn't have done that. But I'm saying minus $10 so far on these parlays because I'm expecting to lose this one. But I got Coastal Carolina, the Mean Green of North Texas, taking out South Alabama. I'm not so sure about that one. And in a group of 5 versus a Power 4 upset, everybody's darling for this year is the Syracuse Orange. Everybody's predicting big things for the Syracuse Orange. And the Ohio Bobcats are a large underdog, and we put them in there too. So that's my 3-team parlay. As you can see, a $10 bet wins you $366.47 when you're talking about those kind of odds. So it's something fun to do. And you're losing a little pizza money if you don't, but not a big deal. So that's my 3 underdog parlay for week 1. The last thing we're going to talk about today before we close it out and get you ready for week 1's action is what was our national champion pick for this year. Wow. So, national champion pick for this year. That was a tough one. I really struggled. Really, really struggled. I wanted to say, it's got to be one of the 2 favorites. So for a lot of the summer, it was one of the 2 favorites was going to win it, Ohio State or Georgia. And I struggled with that over and over again. I started out with LSU. They were going to come around, and I decided after reading lots of stuff and listening to lots of podcasts over the summer that they just didn't add enough on defense to make that leap from, being just a good team to being an excellent team. So I eliminated LSU from my decision process. Ohio State and Georgia. It's just a gut feeling. There's just no other way to put it. Rodney believes in both of those teams. They're going to have a huge advantage with a bye week in the first week in the playoffs when they win their conference championship. They won't have to win as many playoff games as the team I picked. But, yeah, so I just have a gut feeling. I just had a gut feeling that Ohio State, Ryan Day, is going to fumble something in the playoffs. I think, for sure. I bet them to make the playoffs. I think for sure they're going to make the playoffs. If not champions of the Big Ten, they're going to make the playoffs. They're almost guaranteed they're going to make the playoffs. So Ohio State's in the playoffs. They just have to win a couple games when they get there. And I'm saying they fall short. Same with Georgia. There's really no one particular factor that I pointed to except Just a little bit down on some of the defensive line play over the last couple of years. Not quite where it had been. So with that, I chose a team that is getting huge money and who is a definitely a top-notch program, but they're getting huge odds this year. And there, here you go, plus 1,400. Alabama Crimson Tide is our pick for the 2024 national champions. All I can say is they lost a lot in the portal before Kalen DeBoer arrived. And I think the thing that turned me towards Alabama was the recruiting at the end of the summer, towards the end of the summer, and the recruiting momentum at the end of the summer. That tells me one thing, that the players on the roster for the 2024 team are always your best salesman for a program, and they are believing in what their new coach. They're believing in their new coach. And if you get a team with as talented a roster as Alabama, returning quarterback, and we should see a coach who is offensive-centric, and we should see a very big improvement on offense. Defense, already talented out the wazoo. I've got Alabama as my national champion pick for 2024. It's a big risk with a brand-new coach and a brand-new scheme and a very difficult schedule for the Alabama Crimson Tide. But a 12-team playoff allows them a couple of mulligans. You're an SEC team, you're going to get mulligans. You're a Big Ten team, you're going to get mulligans. You're an ACC or Big 12 team, you're not going to get mulligans, right? It's already been proclaimed, right? It's already been proclaimed. So if you're an SEC or a Big Ten team, I don't think it's right, but you'll get mulligans. And Alabama will get mulligans. They'll be able to lose a couple of games, get their feet back under them, make the playoffs, and I think when they get to the playoffs, by then, the brand new coach and his scheme will take over, take that talented roster to the national championship. He made it there last year with a much less talented roster. He'll do it with Alabama and get the win. Alabama is your 2024 national champion prediction from the DPS All Football Talk RodCast. I'm Dan DeSetto. That's the week 1 DPS All Football Talk RodCast. We'll see you next week. Dan out.